I'm now in the Fundamentals 5 project, so you can set that as your current project. And I'll start by taking a look at the Skin tool on the Surfaces palette. And I'm going to use the two wheel arches as my first examples. And if you remember, the first one we trimmed from a four-sided surface. But for the rear wheel arch we created some outline curves. And we also used a control surface, and I made mine invisible. So I'll just bring that back to visible. And my screen is starting to get a bit cluttered here with all these curves. So I'm going to pick all these, and I don't want to delete them because of the construction history. So I'm going to use a format called template here on Object Display, which means that you can't accidentally select them when you're using Pick Object. But you can still see them on screen in grey. So I have these two curves, and they're both degree 5 and 8 spans. And what I can do with the Skin tool is just simply go from one curve to the other and build a surface between them. And wherever I have an edit point on the curve, I get an isopalm on the surface. And the surface has the same structure as the curves, degree 5 and 8 spans. So I want to keep building from this surface, so I'll finish it off by taking a look in the side view and just correcting the fact that it overshoots the lower edge of the car. So if I display my curves, I've got my projecting and trimming on my shelf. So I can just project in the view direction and select the surface, and select the curves and project, and then go straight into trim, pick the surface, pick the region to keep, and then say keep. So that's now tidied up the lower edge of the wheel arch, and I can turn the CVs off for the curves now. And I can then use the Skin tool again to connect the wheel arch to the side of the car. And I can go from this edge, and I don't want the curve, I want to choose the skin edge because it's shorter, and then go across to here. And the surface is a bit distorted because I'm going from this long edge here across to this much shorter edge. But I can sort that out using the Skin controls. And my surface is already highlighted, so I just need to click once on the skin icon to open up the control window. And I can fix this with the flow control settings. And here I've got some choices. So for example, if I choose default, then the surface goes from the shorter edge and takes the natural route down to the longer edge. I could also use extend, which attempts to extend the shorter edge to match the longer one. But it doesn't give a very good result here. So I'm going to go back to connect ends. And I have this extra option here called Modify Range. And that gives me these blue arrows, which I can click and drag to decide where I want the surfaces to start and end from. And you may have noticed that I've got a lot more isopalms on this skin surface, and they're fairly irregular. And the reason for that is that we're building from a trimmed edge. And I can show you that by doing a curve duplicate. And you can see that I've got 6 spans and some bunched up CVs. So what the skin surface is having to do is try to flow between two very differently parameterized edges, and that's why it's having to work quite hard. So it's okay for a quick sketch surface like this, but we can rebuild it better later. Now I've got construction history, so if I take the input curves for example and I move them, but if I do that I'll actually delete the history, and I don't want to do that. So instead I need to move this constructor surface. So to pick a templated surface I need to use the Pick Template tool up here. So if I move that, then the curves will update and the surfaces will update as well to those curves. So that's the first way construction history works. And the second is to go back into the control window. And for that, most people use the Query Edit tool here on Object Edit. And you just click on the surface that's got history, and the control window gets re-engaged. So there's a couple of things we can change here. First of all, you may have noticed these green locators with this letter P. And this is generated by an option in the control section at the bottom. And it's the continuity check. Now we haven't covered continuity yet, it's in the next section. So I'd recommend that you just turn it off to keep the screen decluttered. Or alternatively, you can always just use delete locators to remove them at any time. But the other thing we can do is use the proportional crown up at the top here. And this allows us to dial in some curvature across the skin, either an indent, or if I flip it, then a bulge. And you can see how it's done if you turn the CVs on. Without the crown, it's a flat degree 1 surface with no interior CVs. And as soon as I use a crown, it adds a center row of CVs that allows the surface to bend. So it's a very quick way to sketch out an idea for the wheel arch. So I can turn the 2 curves layers off now, but I'll need to also get that templated surface onto a layer. So I can use Pick Template and add that to the wheel arch curves layer and just tidy up the view. So we've covered the basics of the skin tool between 2 curves or edges, using the flow control and the proportional crown. And in the next tutorial, we'll look at using the chain select option within the skin, the draft and the planar surfaces.